Hello, welcome back to Healing the Inner Child Through Attachment, Wounds, Trauma, and Neglect. Part 2. Part 1, if you haven't seen it, was all about how this inner child actually gets set up, how the wounds occur, how the neglect occurs, and what it sort of creates as a result. Part 2 here, as we talk about in this video, is all about what we can do about it. Practical steps, coping skills, strategies, and more. Hi, my name is Jesse. Welcome to the channel, Open Source Owners, where we talk about what if humans had an owner's manual. Well, healing the inner child would definitely be part of that owner's manual. There's no one right way to do it, but there are approaches to it. But first, you have to understand what we went over in part 1. How does the inner child get wounded, and what is this inner child that people talk about in the therapy realm? So if you've not seen part 1, go ahead and click over and see part 1 first, and then come right back here and watch part 2. If you've already checked out part 1, well, let's get on into part 2 right now. Okay, let's remember the 5 core emotional needs that all humans need, particularly through our attachment phase, which is 0 to 2 years of age, but obviously for much longer than that, all the way up to 7 or early teenage years, we need these core emotional needs to be reflected to us by our primary caregivers. When and if they are not, we basically develop poor coping skills in any of these particular areas, as you shall see. This is usually where the issues come from in adult relationships. One or more of these 5 core emotional needs not being taught, not being reflected, and not being practiced as a child ultimately ends up with trauma formations and reactions in adult relationships later on. And as you see here, I have the quote, "The problem is the solution." Now that comes from Bill Mollison out of Permaculture world, fantastic thinker, and permaculture is a fantastic sort of set of disciplines and practices that you can learn to help you feel more empowered about your positive footprint that you can make on the world. But that's a topic for another video. You can check that out elsewhere on the internet. Okay, so you can see here the 5 core emotional needs. Now, if these are the problem, then the solution is to build those, model those, practice those in your adult life currently. So let's read through these. Secure attachment to others, that's 1 core emotional need. And that looks like, safety, stability, nurturance, and acceptance. Those 4 characteristics primarily. There are others, but that's how we basically develop secure attachment to others. We also need autonomy, competence, and a sense of identity. Particularly, that needs to be modeled to us as children. We need to recognize that we can be autonomous and separate from mom, dad, caregivers, but still be safely, stably, and nurtured into acceptance by the other. We also need, of course, the freedom to express valid needs and emotions. When those valid needs and emotions are not allowed to be expressed, when the child is coming to the parent with a certain emotion that the parent is uncomfortable with and the parent shuts it down, then the child by reflex also shuts that down and turns that into a sort of quarantined aspect of themselves or a wounded inner child. That's where the phrase, the wounded inner child, comes from. The parts of us that were not met with nurturance or acceptance ultimately become sort of separate parts of ourselves that if we don't talk to, if we don't heal, then they just become these wounded inner children that are acting out and projecting through our adult visage, if that's the right word. I always say these words and I never know if they're the right word. We also need spontaneity and play. So that's a core emotional need of the developing child. And of course, realistic limits and self-control. So we need limits modeled to us, but we also need to develop the capacity to control our own limits as we're developing through our early childhood years. So if those are the problems, say you never were, a sense of identity didn't get developed, your autonomy didn't get developed, you're too enmeshed with your parent was too needing the child to meet their emotional needs as opposed to the other way around, then what do we need to develop? Well, we need to develop autonomy and a sense of self-identity. That will most definitely include very clear boundaries and taking time for yourself to celebrate yourself and do the things that you want to do because you love them. If spontaneity and play were never modeled to us as children and we don't really feel comfortable in the land of spontaneity and play, that's the problem. Then the solution is to develop the skill and the capacity to have spontaneity and play. And it's a skill just like any other that you can learn with practice. But again, only if you kind of know what you're focusing on. A lot of therapy that's more talk therapy based is not necessarily giving you skills to focus on. My work tends to be more skill based, where we say, hey, it seems like this aspect of your core emotional needs wasn't wasn't developed or was shut down or actively shamed as a child. So let's now then begin to develop skills. And these are like small daily practices that we'll talk about in just a second in this video that address those core emotional needs that weren't met. And this type of work that we're talking about here is often referred to as reparenting, because if we didn't get it modeled from us at the early attachment style, then we have to sort of model it and create literal neural networks based around these things later by basically being our own best parent, the version of the parent that we sort of wish we had, and by our birthright, we deserve to have had. Okay, so just a quick summary. These are the emotional needs here, and think of these also as being potential values. We're gonna come to sort of defining your values in a second. So think of these as maybe these being core values that you hold. So you can read these. I'll read them quickly. Safety, stability, nurturance, acceptance, autonomy, competence, sense of identity, freedom to express valid needs and emotions, spontaneity and play, realistic limits, and self-control. Those are the 5 core emotional needs that we just went through, summarized into all these sort of values or emotional needs. So hone in on the ones that you find lacking in yourself and that you want to bolster within yourself. Okay, so what does reparenting look like, or what are the needs of reparenting as we begin to do this work? Well, let's look here. Emotional regulation, we need that modeled to us. And if we don't have those skills, we need to then build those. And that's just a matter of building new neural networks in the brain through practice and repetition. Here are some ways you can practice emotional regulation if you're not great at it. And listen, we all struggle with these things at times, and we all have to continually cycle back through working on these. This is not to say that, your therapist or somebody else is better than you or worse than you at anything. It's more about we all have to keep our eye on these aspects and continually improve our skills in these. And particular areas might be weaker for you than others, but that's okay. Nobody's expecting perfection, just that we become aware of the areas that are problematic in our relationships, and we keep working on those slowly but surely. So belly breathing, meditation, observe and validate emotions, which is really what a good parent would do. And later in life, that's what a good therapist does, is they observe your emotion and they help you validate it. They help you normalize it. Allow emotional waves to come and go. Those are practices for emotional regulation. Self-discipline, the ability to say no when your body is saying no, when your intuition is saying no, but also the ability to say yes to yourself when your body is saying, you know what, girl, you need to have fun. You know what, you need a rest day. You know what, you need to say no to this, because when you come home from that type of scenario, it's really destabilizing, etc. So saying no and saying yes, now we're getting into the land of boundaries. This is what boundaries are all about. They're about protecting your core values. Keeping one small promise to yourself, having a morning routine, having a night routine that's based on self-care. And self-care is indeed the next one. Cooking good food for yourself, sleeping well, making sure that you protect your sleep, taking time to reflect, walking, connecting with others, having a morning routine, etc. We'll do a bunch more videos about self-care. Essentially, self-care is like, think of like your body as being like a cell phone or a laptop. You can't just run it without ever plugging it back in or charging it. And the older the battery gets, the more charging it needs. And I think that's fairly true for humans too. The older we get, or the more mature we get, the more time that we need to really dedicate to the balance between self-care and caring for others. And often, obviously, that gets skewed. So if it's totally skewed and you're just caring for others all the time, now is the time, and I invite you to start to consider, well, how much time do I need to spend on me every day just to build my battery, just to give me the reserve so I can properly care for others, but also properly care for myself. The art and skill of practicing childlike joy, spontaneity, and fun, as we mentioned earlier, allowing yourself to just get into music or art or dance or sing or move, do something new, learn something new, jump in a puddle, be silly, be a child, and allow yourself to do that with nobody's permission needed. And of course, you might do this just on your own, singing at the top of your lungs in your car, or dancing like a loon in your bedroom, or going to dance classes, doing things that just allow you to access the part of us that is still there, that is childlike in its awe of reality, that is childlike in its experience of life. And the last one, tolerating discomfort. I say here, this is a life must. Now, it doesn't mean that anybody should just be in endless suffering, of course, but we want to learn to not have to get away from pain or discomfort, particularly emotional or psychic pain or discomfort. There is no way out but through, I say here, and remember and repeat, I can get through this. That's one of the primary mantras of tolerating discomfort. discomfort, especially emotional discomfort, as you go through grief or maybe a divorce or a relationship loss. Recognizing that, of course, you're experiencing grief and it's okay, but you know that you can get through it. Why do you know that? Because you're a human. Humans have been through everything that you could possibly be going through. Millions and millions of humans in past generations that are no longer with us have been through that before, and they can get through it. We are built incredibly resiliently, and there's access to support out there in the world that you can get if you need it. Okay, so how do we heal the child from the inner wounds? Let's get real practical here. I'm just going to give you 3 basic steps that you could start to begin your journey on healing whatever wounding that you have from neglect, from trauma, from abuse, whatever it may be. We all have it, and we're all trying to up our game to the next level. And this is just one way to do that. But if you really want just like a, tell me exactly what to do, Jesse, then this might be it. Feel free to take this and run with it until it stops working for you, and then you can re-up and learn some new skills or get some new mentorship. So first, keep one small self-care promise to yourself every day. I don't care what that is, but it might be like around food. You know you better than anybody knows you. So what types of food do you thrive on? What types of food make you feel sluggish or anxious, etc.? Sleep. Obviously so important. If your sleeping is poor, I would say start there. Just try to put boundaries around sleep. Make sure that you're getting enough quality sleep. Do basically whatever you can to improve your sleep so that your emotional and mental faculties are sort of online and at their best. We really can't perform at our best emotionally or mentally if our sleep is poor. Less media or boundarying media. So, hey, I'll watch the news for 30 minutes a day, but that's it. Or maybe I'll get off Facebook completely, or maybe I'll, block this sort of stream of information, etc. Meditating every day, 5 minutes or less, dancing every day for 5 minutes or less, singing every day, whatever it is, it's a small self-care promise to yourself. What calls to you, what feels to your intuition like it's the most important thing to do, and then just start to give that to yourself every day. This is the idea here, is that there is nothing that will get in the way of you feeding yourself this. That's why it's one small promise every day. Just commit to, I will dance every day if that feels important to you, or I will play every day, and make sure that that's something that you do. You can even get a little self-care calendar and just mark off every day that you do it. If you miss one day, no big deal. Try to never miss 2 days. That piece of advice comes from habit formation and behavior change. If you miss 2 days, the likelihood of you just forgetting about it goes exponentially higher. So try to just get it every single day. If you miss a day, it's okay, but try to never miss 2 days. All right. Step number 2, get clear about your secure attachment values. So remember, we're trying to rebuild a secure attachment if we don't have a secure attachment, and then practice boundaries to protect your values. Boundaries are there to protect your own values. They're not there to punish or keep people out or teach somebody a lesson. They're there to protect you, and that's it. So here are some examples, right? Maybe your secure attachment values are like safety, like I crave safety and I don't feel like I have it enough. That's a really important value. Or maybe it's fun or spontaneity, trust or care or honesty. And you can go to slide number 2, if you just skip back a little bit, to read all those values. We wrote them as emotional needs, but also values too. So if you're brainstorming on values, go back to that until you come up with a few, and then find ways that you protect those. So when and how are those being robbed from you, or is the energy from those in your life being lost? That's where you want to protect boundaries. It could be around food. It could be around sleep. It could be around, negative vibe people in your life. It could be around parents and not having boundaries with them, texting you or calling you at all hours of the day. Could be with children. The child sort of runs everything, etc. So find those and then start to work on boundaries. And step number 3, start talking to your parts and or work with an internal family systems therapist. An IFS therapist will get you all the way there. So if you really want to heal your childhood wounds, find an IFS therapist and start working with them. It's unlike any therapy that you've ever done. It's deeper than regular talk therapy. It's not skills-based insofar as it's CBT or DBT, like they're teaching you skills, but it goes into that deep, deep, deep core work. The only thing that goes as deep as that in my knowledge set that I'm aware of is psychedelic assisted therapy, because it takes you all the way to the inner essence of your soul, or who you actually are as a whole, complete being, not in the segregated parts that we think of as we think of our schemas or our personas or our personalities. So that's one step. Now, if you don't want to do that, that's fine. Start to notice any reactive or childlike aspect of yourself, like your anger, your shutting down, your anxiety, your panic, your self-harm, etc. Whatever it is, when you notice childlike behaviors in yourself, then do the inner work of talking to your parts. Ask permission to those parts to ask questions about why this part exists. So if it's your anger, you could start to get yourself into a position, maybe you take a walk or maybe you do a little meditation, but you start to talk to your anger. You say, hey, anger, I recognize that you're within me. Do I have permission from you to start to ask you some questions about what's going on, why you feel so angry? Once you get permission, which feels like an intuition or an inner yes, and it might take a few times to get permission, but once you do, then you can start asking the anger, why do you feel the need to protect me so powerfully? Why does this anger come out so violently? And you can start to actually get insights into this work. Now, this is not easy to do on your own, and that's why having an IFS therapist is preferable, because you have somebody who really understands how to access this space into sort of a stepwise manner. So it's a little bit more productive and a little maybe less chaotic. However, I know that there are some people who are totally capable of doing this work on their own, and they're willing to sort of keep at it and not give up on it, not get frustrated. If that's you, if you feel like I can do this, I just have to commit to it and practice it, then I encourage you to begin trying it. Anything that comes up that's childlike, or maybe there's a particular aspect of your behavior that you don't like, self-harm or panic attacks, whatever, we can begin to sort of interview them and have a conversation with that part, and that part will eventually reveal the resolution of that same part. Remember, the problem is the solution. So if the problem is your anger or your self-harm, that's also the solution too. Once we get to a deeper, more profound understanding of those things, then the solution becomes apparent. And if you are struggling with any mental health issues or just personal development issues, and you want to take your mental health and your personal development to the next level, then this is my mentorship program that I'm offering called the Home Mentorship Program. You can check it out here. We go through the biological, the spiritual, the social, and the psychological domain, and we get sort of curated content from me and group calls where we get to take any questions related to any of these domains. So you just have a little bit more access to a community that's doing this type of work, but also a mentor in me that can help at a very sort of like affordable cost, give you direct advice or give you direct resources. Click the link below to learn more about the Home Mentorship Program. And if you haven't already, I wrote 2 free ebooks. If you click the other link, they will come directly to your email if you're interested in either of these 2 ebooks. It's just a way of me to say thanks for watching the video all the way to the end. I appreciate it. And that was Healing the Inner Child Through Attachment, Wounds, Trauma, and Neglect, part 2, where we sort of learn what to do about it. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Please comment in the comment section below what you found most interesting, what you're struggling with, any thoughts that you may have. I would love to read those. And until next time, take care of yourselves out there, and we'll talk to you in the next one.